The way that it could become a $1 trillion company is actually by cutting the cost to such a low degree that nobody else can effectively compete with it. And then at that point, they can become a small tax. You'd rather just pay it than try to compete with it. And I think for OpenAI, that's actually a very brilliant strategy. So that's how they could get to become very, very large in valuation, would be to become so pervasively relied upon, and where they take such a minuscule take rate of their participation in you building a company, that could be really effective for them.
That's the picks and shovels play in a way to create the developer ecosystem for AI. And Chamath, to your point, I mean, I think you raise a good point that, what was their motivation to take such a dilutive round, the 10 billion at, what was the valuation at 30?
30, yeah.
Yeah, and does that imply that they're not confident? I mean, the flip side of it could be maybe they know they want to compete on the basis of rapidly, becoming the developer platform. And so they're going to subsidize that developer platform, with negative gross margins for some period of time. And maybe that's why they need a lot of capital.
And they were in kind of a reflexive loop of just cost of getting better versus the amount of money they had to get better. And so maybe they were forced to do it. And then in that point, how would you justify it? You would say, well, the other 50% is still hugely valuable, so that's enough for us. And I think that's very logical as well. We haven't given enough time for a logical framework of investing to develop, which also is tied to a logical framework for entrepreneurship to emerge. We're just way too early. So the thing with all of these language models is that they are grist for the mill. And we talked about this before. If it was a highly proprietary asset, you would have never sold 49% of it to Microsoft for $10 billion because you would assume that it was worth $1 trillion. So it's a huge tell on the part of OpenAI, their deep understanding, and they understand it better than anybody else, that it's a bit of a capped upside. So what is uncapped, I guess, is maybe the better question. Well, if you look at the 1849 gold rush as an example, the people panning for gold, in my opinion, are the people building language models today. They're going to come and they're going to go. But who's going to win? Well, the pick and shovel providers won. Levi Strauss won. So what is the equivalent of that today? I think it's at the silicon layer, because you need to really re-architect how compute will actually work in a world of all of these models. Those folks will get paid. If you look at AMD and NVIDIA, they've been getting paid for years. They continue to get paid. They probably will continue to get paid even more. And so folks that actually take a step into doing something hard and difficult in AI, like custom silicon, could get rewarded. And then there's what I call the white truffles. What are these unique Alba white truffles? These singular sources of data that, when used in reinforcement learning, make your output just zing.
Item one on the docket today, there is just a massive AI FOMO frenzy going on. Economist published a piece this week about the insane fundraising in the generative AI space. This is stuff like ChatGPT, Stable Diffusion, you've heard these names. And there are now 500 generative AI startups, according to this report. That tracks with what I'm seeing in the early stage. And not counting the OpenAI 10 billion from Microsoft investment, donation, rev share, round trip, whatever that is. They have so far collectively raised more than $11 billion. The article included this chart, which you can see if you're on our YouTube channel, and just tons of folks working in audio, image, and text. So we're basically looking at the multimedia, basically revolution of PCs in the 90s occurring again, and a complete platform shift. Doug Leone from Sequoia, one of the greatest investors in history of Silicon Valley, had this to say, and we will comment on the other side of this 50-second clip from Doug.
That AI is the next platform shift, in the same way that mobile was the one before, internet was the one before. So I think AI is real. But I said earlier, we're going to overestimate it in the short term. We're going to invest in everything in the same way that in 1999 we invested in everything. But then Google came out of that, or Facebook came out of that. So I think you have to have a good head on your shoulder, where you don't practice FOMO, where you don't chase every company. AI is real. AI is the next platform. But how do we not invest in everything that walks? How do we make certain investments based on market maps, based on thought processes that are more rational and not do every investment just because every other venture firm is doing every investment.
Okay, Ed. Yeah.
Well, I want to add one other piece of news that we saw this week, which is OpenAI announced that its developer AI, they were cutting the tax on that, or basically the metered rate they charge to use it, by 90%. So I think this is going to be a game changer. I think this is based on the ChatGPT 3.5 API, and of course, they're coming out with 4.0 later this year. I've already had...
Explain to the audience what an API is and why this is important for those people who don't know.
This application programming interface, it allows a developer of some other application to build on top of you. So in other words, like a developer wouldn't have to use this chat interface to get access to the large language model. You could just submit your request through the API. And so...
Give an example of like a popular app and how they might use the ChatGPT API.
So I think like Notion actually had a demo that they published where
incredible.
It was a pretty incredible demo. Maybe we can find it. And it would do things. They added actions in the demo, like generate a task list. So you could take like a document or a meeting summary and would spit out recommendations for next steps or tasks. It could, spit out a table. Basically, it's the autocomplete for everything that we talked about, right? So now Notion doesn't need to build their own LLM expertise. They just use the API.
So when the Notion app, you say, hey, I'm building a marketing plan. And you say, well, okay, give me a list of things that should be on my marketing plan for my new app. It sends a signal to the ChatGPT API, which will be on Azure, Microsoft's platform, and then it gives you the data back. You don't have to build the language model.